The photograph arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, spent folding clothes and pondering dinner. My sister's name appeared on the screen, a picture sent inadvertently, intended for someone else entirely. Without a second thought, I opened it. In that single instant, standing barefoot on my own kitchen tiles, 8 years of my marriage dissolved into a deception I had unknowingly inhabited. My husband was cradling 2 brand new babies. Beneath it, the inscription read, "Daddy loves you both." I didn't cry out, nor did tears fall. I simply stood, phone in hand, and felt an internal stillness descend, absolute and irreversible. My name is Nicole Young. I am 38 years old, and for the majority of my adult existence, I held the conviction that patience was a virtue that eventually yielded its rewards. My profession is that of a forensic accountant, a role that involves scrutinizing minute discrepancies people hope will go unnoticed. An unbalanced sum, an out-of-place transaction, a narrative that skirts the edge of plausibility but never quite settles into it. My career has been built upon a foundation of evidence over sentiment. I simply never envisioned needing those very skills within the confines of my home. Charles and I exchanged vows when I was 30. He possessed ambition, wit, and an innate ability to command attention in any gathering. He was a co-owner of a burgeoning logistics firm that was just gaining momentum. I found immense satisfaction in witnessing his efforts to construct something from its nascent stages. We often discussed the family we envisioned, contemplating the number of children, their names, and whether our lives would unfold in the city or in a more tranquil setting. It felt like an inevitability, as natural a progression as spring yielding to summer. Yet it did not unfold, at least not without significant struggle and a protracted delay. We pursued conception for 2 years before seeking external assistance. Subsequently came the series of appointments, diagnostic tests, and a lexicon of medical jargon that began to feel like a foreign language. In vitro fertilization, artificial insemination, and hormone injections left a landscape of bruises on my abdomen, which I concealed beneath looser garments. We experienced 3 miscarriages before they ever progressed beyond the detection of a fetal heartbeat on a screen. Each loss was a private sorrow that I bore predominantly in solitude, as Charles consistently appeared to recuperate more swiftly than I did. In the quiet hours of the night, I would engage in a familiar mental exercise, akin to analyzing client accounts. Where did things go awry? What crucial detail did I overlook? What different course of action might have yielded a better outcome? I attributed blame to my own physical constitution, to stress, to my demanding career, and even to a glass of wine consumed one evening before I knew I was pregnant the first time. I cast blame on everything except the underlying truth, because at that juncture, the truth remained beyond my reach. Throughout this ordeal, Charles offered his hand in waiting rooms, reiterating the same comforting assurance, as if verbalizing it were essential to making it a tangible reality. We will navigate this together. I trusted his words implicitly, with the same unwavering faith one places in the sunrise, without empirical evidence or lingering doubt, simply because the alternative was too profound to contemplate. My sister Emily was also present, or at least so it seemed. 3 years my junior, she was invariably warm, always ready with a hug, a comforting meal, or an open invitation to call any time, all of which I accepted at face value. She often expressed her admiration for my resilience, remarking that she couldn't comprehend how I managed. It never once occurred to me that profound admiration and bitter envy can present themselves in precisely the same guise. On the very day the photograph arrived, I had just concluded a rather uninspired video conference with a client, the kind of monotonous afternoon that constitutes the bulk of one's existence. I recall the angled sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, characteristic of late autumn. I remember my phone vibrating twice, and then I remember looking down to see my husband's face. This was the same countenance that, a mere 3 weeks prior, had urged us to consider one more treatment cycle, to persevere. Now he was gazing at 2 infants with an expression that conveyed they were the very nucleus of his world. Emily contacted me almost immediately afterward. I answered without uttering a word. "Nicole," she began, her voice faltering, "I never intended for you to discover it this way." I terminated the call. I posed no questions. None were necessary. 8 years of forensic analysis had instilled in me a singular principle. Once the initial anomaly is detected, one does not engage the perpetrator. Instead, one meticulously gathers all corroborating evidence. The complete scope of the deception must be ascertained before any acknowledgement of its discovery is made. Consequently, I turned my attention to my laptop. I identified a family law attorney with the highest commendation in the city, a Mr. Daniel Brooks, and secured the earliest available appointment. 2 days later, I found myself seated across from him in an office perfumed with fresh coffee and premium paper, where I affixed my signature to the preliminary documents initiating divorce proceedings against my husband of 8 years. My hand remained remarkably steady, a fact that surprised me. I divulged nothing to Charles. I did not inform Emily of my knowledge. That evening, I returned home and prepared dinner as if no disruption had occurred. For the first time in many years, I grasped the truth with absolute clarity. The obligation to explain did not rest with me. While my husband was celebrating the arrival of 2 newborns with the very woman who had once claimed sisterhood with me, blissfully unaware that I remained in ignorance, I was already several steps ahead of them both. What transpired next, executed with quiet resolve and devoid of a single tear, was an action neither of them could have anticipated. The morning following the completion of the legal paperwork, I awoke before dawn and performed an act I had not undertaken in months. I brewed coffee for 1 rather than for 2, and I experienced no remorse whatsoever. Charles had sent a casual text the previous evening regarding a business trip that would necessitate his absence for several days. I reread it twice, then commenced my investigation. My professional experience has taught me that individuals who are utterly convinced of their impunity tend to leave the most disorganized evidence. Their vigilance wanes because they have persuaded themselves that it is no longer required. Charles had dedicated 8 years to cultivating the image of a devoted husband, one who endured the trials of infertility alongside me. This narrative demanded constant upkeep, and those preoccupied with maintaining one facade rarely notice the traces of another story they are inadvertently revealing. I initiated my inquiry with the credit card statements. We had maintained largely separate financial accounts, a decision that had seemed pragmatic at the time and now felt almost prescient. However, a joint account was utilized for household expenditures. Within months of grocery purchases and utility payments, I discovered 4 distinct charges at the same hotel in a suburban area neither of us had any reason to visit. Each stay lasted for 2 nights, consistently from a Thursday to a Friday. I cross-referenced these dates with my personal calendar, the one on my phone that automatically logged all activities, including location history. I had honestly forgotten that feature was activated. 3 of those hotel stays coincided precisely with periods I was recuperating from in vitro fertilization procedures, weeks during which Charles had informed me he needed to decompress by working late at the office. I remained at my kitchen table, my laptop open, until nearly 2 in the morning. Gradually, the preceding 3 years of my marriage reconfigured themselves into a reality I scarcely recognized. Emily had mentioned on multiple occasions that she was merely assisting Charles with his appointments when I was unable to attend. A doctor's visit here, a follow-up there. "I'm just helping out," she would say, as if it involved no personal cost. I unearthed records indicating that these appointments frequently occurred on days when Charles had no scheduled medical consultations. By the time I accessed the shared photo storage account, Charles was unaware that I retained access to a joint cloud folder from years past that had never been deactivated. I was no longer surprised. The digital repository contained photographs dating back nearly 3 years. Emily at his company holiday party, standing perhaps a little too close. A weekend excursion logged as a business trip, with a beach visible in the background, nowhere near any client location. They hadn't been overtly careless, precisely. They had simply never anticipated that I would investigate. I wish to be candid about something. There is a distinct form of anguish that accompanies the confirmation of a suspected betrayal, differing significantly from the shock of uncovering one that was entirely unforeseen. This was the latter. Beneath the pain, a colder understanding began to crystallize. Clarity. For 8 years, I had internalized every hardship of our marriage as a personal failing. My body, my fault, my burden to rectify. Now I comprehended that I had been shouldering the weight of another's choices all along. I did not confront Charles. I did not return Emily's call. Instead, I did what I do best. I compiled a dossier. Every hotel charge, every inconsistent alibi, every photograph with a timestamp that narrated a more truthful account than either of them had ever offered me. I organized it as I would evidence for a client, with systematic precision and an absence of commentary. The facts, unadorned, spoke with sufficient clarity. I transmitted the entire file to Daniel Brooks 2 days later. He reviewed it in my presence during our second consultation. His expression was unreadable, a practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to witnessing every conceivable facet of marital heartbreak. When he finally looked up, he simply stated, "This is thorough." I informed him that I possessed 8 years of experience in discerning what others overlooked. He did not inquire about the meaning of my statement, nor did I elaborate. 3 days after that meeting, my phone rang with a number I recognized but had not anticipated. Margaret, Charles's mother. Our relationship had always been warm, characterized by genuine affection rather than obligation. She would call simply to check in, to inquire about my work, to share updates about her garden. This call felt different from the outset. Her voice was strained, hesitant in a way I had never before perceived. "Nicole," she began, followed by a prolonged silence, punctuated only by her breathing on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling, a barely suppressed sob making it difficult to maintain an even tone. "Please," she implored, "don't tell him yet." I stood perfectly still in my kitchen, the very same kitchen where, just over a week prior, I had viewed that photograph, and felt the ground beneath me shift once more, unsettling what I believed I had fully comprehended. "Don't tell him what, Margaret?" I inquired. She did not directly answer my question, instead repeating those 4 words incessantly, as if they were her sole anchor. "Don't tell him yet. Don't tell him yet." Listening to my mother-in-law's unraveling on the phone, I realized I had unearthed an infidelity. Yet, with an almost impossible sense of premonition, I felt I had not yet uncovered the complete truth. I met Margaret 2 days later at a small, unassuming coffee shop situated midway between our residences, a familiar spot we had frequented numerous times over the years for relaxed, comfortable conversations. This time, she was already seated when I arrived, her hands clasped so tightly around her mug that her knuckles had turned white. She did not look up until I pulled out the chair opposite her. She appeared older than I remembered, not in terms of chronological age, but in a profound weariness, the kind of exhaustion that stems from carrying an immense burden for far too long without respite. Margaret had always exuded composure, a woman who meticulously ironed her napkins and never raised her voice, even during disagreements. The woman now seated before me bore the unmistakable signs of having slept little in days. "I need you to comprehend something," she stated before I had even removed my coat. "What I am about to reveal, I should have disclosed 8 years ago. I have regretted my silence every single day since." I remained silent. In my line of work, silence often serves as the most effective catalyst for someone to continue speaking. Margaret took a slow, deliberate breath and confided that she had possessed knowledge of something significant, something that would have altered the course of events dramatically from the very inception of our marriage. She divulged it in fragments, artfully circling the crucial information, much like individuals do when they fear that plain speaking will render it irrevocably real. "Does Emily know?" I asked, as that question weighed most heavily on my mind. If my own sister had harbored knowledge of a clandestine secret concerning my marriage for years and remained silent while engaging in an affair with my husband, I doubted my capacity to endure the answer. Margaret shook her head emphatically. "No, Emily knows none of this, nor does Charles." Her eyes met mine, and an almost desperate plea was evident within them. "Only I and one other individual, Dr. Collins, your former physician." A knot formed in my stomach. Dr. Rebecca Collins had overseen nearly every phase of our fertility treatments 8 years prior. The diagnostic tests, the procedures, the innumerable discussions regarding probabilities, options, and potential future developments. I had not spoken with her in years, not since we had finally ceased treatment and attempted to find solace in the life we possessed, rather than the one we had envisioned. "What connection does she have to this?" I inquired. Margaret's hands trembled as she gripped her cup. "There was a report, test results, from when you two were exploring every avenue. I saw it before Charles did. I was not meant to. It arrived at our home by mistake, addressed to him, and I opened it without thinking, as one does with routine mail." She paused, and when she resumed, her voice had softened to a near whisper. It was not routine. I read it and immediately understood that if Charles were to see it, it would shatter something within him that I believed was irreparable. Thus, I made a decision. I contacted Dr. Collins directly and implored her, as a mother, to allow me to handle it in my own manner and on my own timeline. She acquiesced, despite her better judgment, as she had known our family for many years and trusted my discretion to act appropriately for everyone's sake. Margaret's gaze drifted downwards towards the table. I never acted appropriately for anyone. I merely postponed the pain, allowing it to fester and grow into something far more formidable. I reflected on all the pieces of the puzzle I had already assembled: the hotel receipts, the contradictory alibis, the photographs that conveyed a more authentic narrative than either Charles or Emily had ever presented. Upon entering this conversation, I had assumed I possessed a complete understanding of the dissolution of my marriage. Sitting opposite Margaret, I realized I had only been observing the superficial aspects of something far more ancient and far more perplexing. "Margaret," I articulated carefully, "what did that report indicate?" With trembling hands, she reached into her purse and retrieved a small, time-worn slip of paper. It was not the report itself, she explained, but a note she had scribbled to herself on the day she had read it. Something to aid her memory of its precise contents, should she ever find the courage to bring it forth. She did not hand it to me, but held it as if it were an object too perilous to release into the world just yet. "I cannot tell you here," she said. "Not like this, not in fragments. You deserve to see it properly, the way I should have shown Charles 8 years ago, instead of concealing it in a drawer and convincing myself I was protecting him." Her voice faltered. I was protecting myself from witnessing his devastation, from being the one who caused his ruin. I extended my hand across the table and covered hers, an instinctive gesture, given everything I now understood she had withheld from us. Whatever burden she carried had clearly cost her nearly a decade of peace. "I need to see that file," I stated, "the actual one, wherever Dr. Collins keeps her records." Margaret nodded slowly, dabbing her eyes with the back of her free hand. Then she uttered something that resonated with me throughout the remainder of the day, replaying incessantly as I drove home through streets that suddenly felt alien. "Those babies changed everything," Nicole said quietly, "but not in the way Charles believes." The following morning, before I had even finished my first cup of coffee, I telephoned Dr. Rebecca Collins' office. I had not spoken with her in nearly 5 years, not since the final unsuccessful treatment cycle, when Charles and I had quietly resolved to cease our efforts and grieve the family we would not have. Her receptionist connected me with far greater speed than I had anticipated, and when Dr. Collins answered, her voice carried an initial note of surprise that quickly modulated into a more cautious tone. "Nicole," she said, "it has been a considerable time. I need to access my old file," I informed her. "All of it. Every test, every result from the year we underwent treatment together." A pause ensued on the line, sufficiently long for me to discern the subtle hum of the clinic in the background. "May I inquire as to the reason for this request?" "Margaret visited me," I stated simply. Another pause, briefer this time. "Come in this afternoon," she said. "I will retrieve everything myself." The clinic appeared remarkably unchanged from my recollection. The same muted gray walls, the same watercolor prints designed to soften the impact of devastating news. Dr. Collins met me in her office rather than an examination room. A substantial folder already rested on her desk. She was in her 50s now, her hair, once predominantly dark, now streaked with silver. Yet her demeanor remained the same measured, unyielding approach, unwilling to dilute facts into a more palatable form. "Before I present this to you," she began, "I want you to understand that I have regretted my involvement in this matter for years. Margaret approached me during a period of profound distress, and I made a choice I would not repeat. I allowed a mother's apprehension to supersede a patient's entitlement to their own results." She slid the folder toward me. "I am truly sorry, Nicole." I opened it with hands steadier than I had anticipated, given my premonition of what I might discover. Within its pages were documents I recognized: hormone panels, ultrasound notes, the familiar shorthand of 8 years of persistent effort. However, towards the rear, I found a report I had never previously seen, dated almost precisely 8 years earlier, addressed solely to Charles, and conspicuously not to me. I read through the medical terminology, slowly translating it in my mind, much as I had once deciphered financial statements for bewildered clients, until the meaning became unequivocally clear. The results pertained not to me at all, but to Charles. The report demonstrated with stark clinical clarity that the challenges we had faced for years had not originated with my body, as I had erroneously believed for nearly a decade. It indicated a male factor, finding so significant that Dr. Collins had formally recommended, in writing, that we engage in a discussion regarding alternative paths forward as a couple. That letter had been dispatched home in an envelope addressed to Charles. Margaret, having mistakenly opened it, had opted not to give it to her son, making a unilateral decision in a moment of panic to shield him from a truth she deemed he could not withstand. I sat in that quiet office, and 8 years of self-recrimination reconfigured themselves into something entirely disparate. All the late nights I had spent mentally calculating my potential missteps, every procedure I had endured, believing my own body was the sole reason for our suffering, every apologetic whisper I had directed at Charles in the darkness, lamenting my inability to provide him with his deepest desire. None of it had ever belonged to me in the first place. Why did she never inform him, I asked, though a part of me already grasped the essence of the answer. Fear, I suspect, Dr. Collins replied gently. Margaret loved her son with an intensity that, for some mothers, eclipses the importance of truth. She convinced herself that if he never knew, it would never cause him pain. I do not believe she considered the eventual cost to both of you. My thoughts turned to Emily, then to a photograph of Charles holding 2 infants, the caption unequivocally identifying him as their father. If the report before me was accurate, and I had no remaining reason to doubt its veracity, then those children were not biologically his. This implied that Emily either remained unaware of the truth herself, or she was privy to something even more complex than an affair. I did not voice these thoughts aloud. I simply asked Dr. Collins provided the necessary copies without any hesitation, sliding the freshly printed pages across her desk with an air of finally being allowed to perform her duties as she should have from the outset, after a period of 8 years. I chose not to confront Charles that day, nor did I contact Emily. I even postponed reaching out to Margaret immediately, despite knowing I owed her some form of response following the revelations she had shared. Instead, I drove home and remained in my car, parked in the driveway for an extended period, the folder resting on the passenger seat beside me. My mind replayed every iteration of my marriage that I had embraced over the years, the optimistic vision, the sorrowful one, and the deeply injured perspective I had been inhabiting for the preceding 2 weeks. None of these had encompassed the full reality. Now, I held the crucial element that redefined the significance of everything else. When I finally made contact with Margaret that evening, my tone was unexpectedly composed, which seemed to surprise her. I informed her that I possessed the file and understood its contents. A prolonged silence followed on her end of the line. When she eventually spoke, her voice conveyed a sense of relief interwoven with profound weariness, as if a burden she had carried in solitude for 8 years had finally been partially lifted. I commented that I now understood the reason for her mother's terror, recalling the exact moment she first saw the infants. For nearly 2 weeks following the submission of the legal documents, I received no communication from Charles. He was residing with Emily, presumably engaged in playing house with 2 infants whose very existence carried a truth he had not yet grasped. I dedicated those 2 weeks to diligently completing the tasks I had initiated, holding 2 additional meetings with Daniel Brooks, meticulously organizing financial records, and systematically navigating the practical steps involved in dissolving a marriage, all while concealing a secret that would ultimately lead to its dissolution, albeit for reasons entirely distinct from those I had initially surmised. I made no attempt to contact Emily. I was uncertain of the extent of her awareness regarding these matters, and, to be frank, I was hesitant to discover it. Certain betrayals can be overcome through sheer indignation. This particular instance, however, possessed deeper roots, and I was still in the process of fully comprehending my own position. It was Margaret who initiated contact on a Thursday evening, her voice strained with a palpable mix of apprehension and urgency. She informed me that Charles was returning home that very night, intending to properly introduce the babies to her. After a brief pause, she added that he would be bringing Emily. I immediately grasped the implication of her words and the emotional toll it would exact from her. Margaret, I told her, she was not obligated to do anything she wasn't prepared for. Margaret then quietly stated that she had concealed this matter for 8 years, Nicole, and believed it was time to stop. Though I was not present during the initial event, Margaret recounted the entire sequence of events afterward with such vivid detail that I could vividly picture it in my mind, as if I had been a silent observer standing in the doorway. Charles arrived first, entering the house with the same unhesitating self-assurance he exuded in any environment, the inherent confidence of an individual who had never questioned his own deservingness of favorable circumstances. Emily followed closely behind, each of her hands cradling a baby carrier, her expression carefully composed to convey a blend of apology and pride. Margaret later described Emily as appearing exhausted in that distinct manner characteristic of new mothers, yet simultaneously illuminated from within, akin to individuals who have finally obtained something they had long desired. Charles placed his bag near the entrance and turned to face his mother with an expression that Margaret conveyed she would never forget. Open, hopeful, almost boyish, the look of someone about to deliver the most joyful tidings of his life. "Mom," he announced, gesturing towards the twins, whom Emily was delicately retrieving from their carriers, "you are finally a grandmother." Margaret recounted that the room fell into a profound silence. She explained that as she gazed upon the 2 small faces, something within her simply gave way. All the years of suppression, the sleepless nights spent convincing herself that her silence was protecting her son, collapsed inwardly the instant she saw the infants nestled in her son's arms. She described feeling a rush of blood drain from her face, her legs growing unsteady, compelling her to grasp the back of a chair for support. Charles immediately perceived his mother's reaction, his smile faltering into bewilderment. "Mom, what's wrong?" he inquired. Margaret conveyed that she opened her mouth, and the words that emerged were not the carefully rehearsed phrases she had practiced countless times over 8 long years. They were softer, more fractured than intended, but ultimately, after everything, they were truthful. "Wait," she whispered. "He didn't tell you." Charles became motionless. Emily, standing directly behind him with 1 infant still in her arms, turned a shade of pale that Margaret immediately recognized as a significant reaction, indicating something unexpected even to Emily. Whatever Margaret was about to disclose, it represented new information for both of them, albeit for different reasons. "Tell me what?" Charles asked, his voice lowering to a cautious tone, already sensing an imminent shift in his reality. Margaret did not immediately respond. She described standing there for a considerable duration, her gaze moving between her son and the woman with whom he had established a clandestine family. She felt the cumulative weight of 8 years pressing down in that single, unbearable silence. She recalled thinking about me, about the years I had spent blaming my own body, apologizing for something that had never been my failing to begin with. That thought, she stated, was what finally granted her the fortitude to act. According to Margaret, an immeasurable stretch of time elapsed without anyone speaking. Emily shifted the baby in her arms, her expression tightening with a fear that stemmed not from judgment, but from profound confusion. Charles remained frozen by the doorway, still clad in his coat, awaiting an answer his mother was not yet prepared to provide. Margaret then recounted that she finally turned, walked into the study without uttering another word, and knelt before the compact, fireproof safe she had kept concealed in the back of the closet for precisely this moment. The moment she had repeatedly assured herself would arrive, though a part of her had begun to doubt if that day would ever truly dawn. Her hands were trembling, she said, as she manipulated the combination lock. Charles had followed her partway down the hall, now observing his mother kneeling before a safe he had never known existed. Emily remained further back, still holding one of the twins, her face a tableau of bewilderment and what Margaret described as an almost palpable fear. Within the safe lay a single, sealed envelope, its edges softened by 8 years of being touched, contemplated, and returned to its hiding place. Margaret lifted it out with both hands, handling it as one would a fragile object, something that had already fractured once and could potentially break again the moment it was finally opened. She turned back towards her son, the envelope held against her chest, and for the first time in 8 years, she was finally prepared to allow him to witness its entire contents. Margaret carried the envelope back into the living room and placed it on the coffee table, her hand still trembling slightly as she withdrew her fingers, as if releasing something she had safeguarded for so long required its own distinct effort. Charles stood over it for a moment, not touching it, and Margaret later shared that she could perceive him bracing himself, much like someone preparing to step into frigid water. "What is this?" he inquired quietly. "Please sit down," Margaret instructed. He complied. Emily settled onto the edge of an armchair opposite him, still cradling one of the twins against her shoulder, the infant emitting a soft fuss in the room's palpable tension. Margaret then opened the envelope herself, her fingers meticulously handling paper that had clearly been folded and unfolded numerous times over the years. She laid out the contents on the table, page by painstaking page. The original laboratory results, a letter from Dr. Collins addressed directly to Charles, and a handwritten note Margaret had appended years prior, dated the same week she had intercepted the original correspondence. Charles first picked up the medical report. Margaret observed his eyes scanning the page, initially slowly, then accelerating, only to decelerate again as he reread specific lines, attempting to decipher language that, while not overly complex, was clearly reshaping a fundamental aspect of his understanding of the past 8 years of his life. "This states," he began, then paused. He looked up at his mother. "This is about me." "Yes," Margaret replied softly. "This isn't Nicole's file. This is mine." His voice had acquired a peculiar flatness, a tone Margaret had never before heard from him. "You're telling me the reason we couldn't conceive children was never her." Margaret nodded, unable to speak past the constriction in her throat. Charles set the paper down with deliberate care, as if his hands had suddenly become unreliable. 8 years, he said. 8 years I allowed her to believe it was her fault. She apologized to me, Mom. She used to cry and apologize to me, and I let her. His voice cracked on the final word, for I had never realized there was any alternative explanation. Emily had become completely still across the room, the baby now quiet against her shoulder. Margaret recounted observing a shift across Emily's features as the pieces began to fall into place. If the report was accurate, if the male factor diagnosis 8 years prior had been genuine and unresolved, then these children in her arms, conceived with Charles during their affair, were unlikely to share his biological heritage either. The same condition that had made conception nearly impossible with me would have presented similar difficulties with her. "Charles," Emily said carefully, "what does this mean?" He did not respond. His gaze remained fixed on his mother, a raw and furious emotion building behind his eyes. "You knew," he stated. "You've known for 8 years, and you let me believe." He was unable to complete the sentence. He stood up abruptly, the paper still clutched in his hand, and began pacing the length of the living room, as if his body needed to move because his mind was incapable of processing the stillness. "I was trying to protect you," Margaret stated, her voice breaking. "I know that isn't an excuse. I know what it cost you both. I have hated myself every single day since. Protect me from what? Charles's voice rose for the first time. From the truth, from a piece of paper. You let me watch my wife blame herself for 8 years. Mom, you let me watch her undergo procedures, endure losses, go through everything, believing it was her body failing us, when all along, he stopped, pressing the heel of his hand against his forehead as if trying to physically contain his thoughts. Emily slowly stood, shifting the baby onto her hip. Charles, she said again, more quietly this time, I need you to look at this with me. If what this says is true, then these babies... She too could not finish. The room descended into a silence heavier than anything that had preceded it. Margaret recounted that Charles finally turned towards Emily then, and a silent understanding passed between them that had nothing to do with affection, and everything to do with the sudden, chilling realization that whatever they had constructed together over the past 3 years had been built upon the exact same flawed foundation as the marriage he had just dismantled. The affair, the secrecy, the children he had been so proud to introduce as his own less than 10 minutes prior, none of it held the meaning he had believed. As he walked through the doorway, he glanced at the reports scattered across the coffee table, then at his mother, then at Emily holding a child who might not share his lineage at all. Margaret described his face undergoing a transformation she could only liken to an internal collapse, not physical, but a disintegration from within, while the external facade remained somehow intact. I need to see Nicole, he finally stated, his voice hollow. I need to talk to her. Charles, Margaret began, perhaps you should sit with this first. Give yourself some time. But he was already in motion, grabbing his keys from the entryway table and opening the front door before anyone could intervene. Margaret recounted calling out his name once, her voice catching in her throat, but he did not turn back. She stood in the doorway and watched his car pull out of the driveway at excessive speed, its taillights vanishing down the street into the darkness. What Charles did not yet comprehend, driving towards my residence with 8 years of buried truth unraveling behind him, was that some doors, once fully closed, do not reopen merely because someone finally grasps why they ought to have remained shut. Charles arrived at my home shortly after 9 that evening. I observed his headlights sweep across the living room wall before I even heard his car door open, and I recognized with a peculiar sense of calm the precise reason for his visit. I did not rush to the door. I finished folding the towel I was holding, placed it on the counter, and proceeded to the entrance at my own pace. He appeared different standing on my porch than he had in the 8 years of our marriage. Disheveled in a way I had never witnessed, his collar askew. His eyes were red-rimmed, like someone who had been weeping in his car for the duration of the drive. He still clutched the medical report, now creased from being held too tightly. You knew, he stated before I had even fully opened the door. Nicole, you knew, didn't you, about the report? He held it up as if presenting evidence, needing my confirmation of something he already intuitively understood to be true. I found out 2 weeks ago, I replied, the same way I discovered about Emily. He flinched at her name. Nicole, I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this. I know, I responded, and I meant it. That was the peculiar aspect of the situation. Standing there on my own porch, observing the shattered remnants of a man who had just learned that 8 years of guilt he had allowed me to bear alone had never truly been mine, I felt a sentiment closer to sorrow for him than to anger. Not enough sorrow to alter my existing course of action, but sufficient to recall that he too had been living within a fabricated reality, even if he had subsequently erected numerous of his own deceptions upon it. May I come in? He inquired. Please, I just need to talk. I permitted him entry, not out of any sense of obligation. I allowed him in because I desired this conversation to unfold on my terms, within my space, where I held the prerogative to terminate it at any moment. We sat in the living room, the setting for our 8 years of holidays and quiet evenings. He recounted everything, how his mother had presented him with the file, how Emily had turned pale upon realizing the twins were likely not biologically his either, and how the affair he had so confidently cultivated had disintegrated within the span of 10 minutes. He spoke rapidly, almost desperately, as if by explaining enough, quickly enough, I might reconsider my decision made in Daniel Brooks's office. "I'm not asking you to forgive Emily," he stated. "I'm not even asking you to forgive me for the affair. I know that is inexcusable. But Nicole, if I had known, if my mother had simply told me the truth 8 years ago, none of this would have happened. You have to see that this began with a lie that wasn't mine." I allowed him to finish. Through 8 years of marriage and a career dedicated to discerning truth from irrelevant noise, I had learned that individuals invariably reveal more when permitted to articulate their entire narrative. "You are correct," I finally said. "The lie was not yours. Your mother made a choice she should not have, and she will bear its consequence for the remainder of her life. And honestly, Charles, I believe she already understands that better than either of us could articulate to her." I paused. "But you are mistaken about one thing. This did not begin with your mother's secret. It began the day you decided that whatever you felt was lacking at home, you were entitled to seek elsewhere with my sister, without ever informing me that you were experiencing difficulties." "I didn't know how to say it," he replied quietly. "You were already carrying so much." "So you allowed me to carry more," I responded. "You let me believe I was the reason we couldn't start a family for 8 years while you built one with someone else. The medical report does not negate that, Charles. It explains a component of the pain. It does not erase the choice you made in response to it." He offered no counter-argument. I observed a visible acceptance of my words dawn on his face. The fight drained from him, much like when someone realizes their meticulously constructed argument, rehearsed throughout a lengthy drive, falters when finally voiced aloud. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice smaller than I had heard it in years. "Now," I said, "the divorce proceeds. Nothing that transpired tonight alters that." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on his hands, the report still creased between his fingers. "And Emily," I added, "that is no longer my concern." As I spoke those words aloud, I realized their truth. Somewhere within the past 2 weeks, between the hotel receipts, Margaret's confession, and the stark clinical language of an old medical file, I had ceased to feel the need to know what had become of my sister. Whatever she and Charles had forged together, they would have to navigate its remnants without my observation. Charles departed shortly before midnight. I stood at the window and watched his taillights recede down the same street from which they had arrived, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt a sense of settling within my chest rather than a tightening. For 8 years, I had measured my self-worth against a narrative that was never true. I now understood that the conclusion of my marriage had never truly hinged on a photograph, a betrayal, or even a secret concealed within a medical file. It had culminated in the moment I finally relinquished the expectation of others revealing the truth and took it upon myself to discover it. The final mediation session was scheduled for a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Charles had sat in my living room, poring over a report that fundamentally altered his perception of our marriage. I recall dressing for the occasion with the same deliberate simplicity I would employ for any significant professional meeting, aiming for a composed appearance that suggested no undue thought had been given to my presentation. I was no longer performing strength. By that point, I possessed it inherently. Daniel Brooks met me outside the courthouse a few minutes early, running through the final particulars one last time, although there was little left to discuss. The financial disclosures had been exhaustive, and the settlement terms were equitable, if not particularly generous to Charles, given the comprehensive evidence revealed by the paper trail. I had requested nothing beyond what I was rightfully entitled to. There was no need to impose punishment through financial settlements. The truth had already inflicted more damage than any agreement could. Charles was awaiting us inside with his own legal counsel, appearing diminished somehow compared to the man I had married, though I recognized this had less to do with the room and more to do with the 3 weeks he had just endured. His mother's secret had exacted a heavier price than a decade of misplaced guilt. It had cost him the very relationship he had established to replace our marriage. I had learned indirectly through a mutual acquaintance that Emily had already relocated out of state with the twins, unwilling to remain in a place that served only as a stark reminder of a foundation she had once believed to be solid. Charles had not contested her departure. A part of me understood his passive acceptance. Some things, once irrevocably fractured, are not worth the effort of feigning repair. When Charles saw me across the table, he made one final attempt. "Nicole," he said quietly before the formal proceedings commenced, "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Is there any conceivable way we can try again?" I looked at him for a considerable moment, and I experienced an emotion I had not anticipated at that juncture. Not anger, not even sadness, but a profound sense of quiet finality, akin to the feeling of completing the final page of a book. You already anticipate the conclusion. "There is none," I responded. "Not because I am incapable of pardoning you, Charles. I believe, given sufficient time, I likely will." However, absolution was never intended to equate to remaining. He offered no counter-argument, merely nodding. A release seemed to ripple through his posture, as if a portion of him had been anticipating precisely that sentiment, even while another part harbored a contrary hope. Following that, the legal proceedings progressed with remarkable speed. Daniel had executed his tasks with considerable skill, leaving minimal grounds for dispute. Once it was all concluded, the final signatures affixed, and every document duly registered, I found myself standing outside the courthouse, bathed in the late morning sun. For the first time in 8 years, I felt utterly liberated from the constraints of anyone else's narrative of my existence. Margaret contacted me that same evening. She didn't directly solicit my forgiveness. I suspect she grasped, perhaps more acutely than most, that absolution isn't an instantaneous exchange. She simply conveyed her admiration for my handling of the situation and expressed a hope that one day we might forge a connection independent of Charles's presence between us. I assured her I would welcome that, and I genuinely meant it. Margaret's silence had imposed a significant cost upon all of us. Yet I had observed her efforts throughout the preceding month, a quiet endeavor to rectify matters in whatever capacity she could. That intention held a greater significance for me than she likely comprehended. I never encountered Charles again after that day, save for a brief transactional interaction months later concerning a minor administrative matter. Neither of us felt inclined to engage further. I eventually learned that he had divested his stake in the logistics firm and relocated to a different locale, presumably in an effort to establish a life sufficiently distant from the one that had crumbled so spectacularly before the eyes of those he held dear. As for myself, I chose not to reconstruct my life based on what I had lost. Instead, I built it upon the wisdom I had gained. A year subsequent to the finalization of our divorce, I allocated a portion of the settlement funds to establish a modest organization. Its purpose is to assist couples navigating the complexities of fertility treatments, ensuring genuine transparency, unfettered access to their personal medical data, and comprehensive support. This approach prevents individuals from bearing burdens of guilt that were never rightfully theirs. I chose not to name it after any specific individual. It did not require my personal narrative to possess inherent value. Its existence was sufficient. I often reflect upon those 8 years, not typically with resentment, but with a peculiar sense of gratitude for the person they ultimately shaped me to be. For so long, I harbored the conviction that I had failed in the singular pursuit that meant the most to me. I now understand that I was never unsuccessful. I simply placed my trust in individuals who lacked the integrity to warrant it. For 8 years, I castigated myself. I refused to squander another moment engaged in such futility. Occasionally, the most potent form of retribution isn't inflicting suffering upon another. It is the resolute refusal to continue harboring their falsehoods. If you have followed my account to this point, I am curious about your perspective on Nicole's subsequent journey. Do you believe she will ever open her heart to a new relationship, or do you envision her finding complete fulfillment independently? Please share your thoughts in the comments below and indicate your current location. I cherish hearing from each of you. We have numerous similar narratives prepared for your perusal, so ensure you subscribe to avoid missing any such unfolding. Let us continue this exploration together.